Welcome to Rise and Reinvent, the podcast where we explore the bold journeys of professionals who've embraced change, challenged convention, and redefined what success looks like on their own terms. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Ravind Budhiraja, a technology leader with more than 2 decades of experience in consulting and solution delivery. From his early days growing up in India to leading digital transformation initiatives here in the United States, Ravind's story is one of self discovery, adaptability, and quiet resilience. In this episode, we dive into his journey from mechanical engineering to mastering emerging technology and how saying yes to teaching transformed his perspective and his career. He shares powerful insights on navigating uncertainty, reinventing identity, and finding balance between ambition and well being. If you've ever felt like you're ready for more, but unsure where to begin, this conversation is for you. Let's jump into it. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Ravind Budhiraja, a director of solutions delivery. Ravind has been doing technology and consulting for the past 20 years, with the last 13 working with Proficient. Welcome to the Rise and Reinvent podcast, Ravind.
Thanks, Nicole. Excited to be here.
We are so happy to have you, and I'm excited for this conversation. So, to get us started, I'd love to hear more about you as a person. Not your career journey, but you and where things started and how you ended up the person that you are today.
Sure. So I'll try and keep this brief. I was born in India, grew up in Bombay mostly. So spent my first 20 years there. I studied engineering also in India. And at that time, I wasn't kind of sure what I wanted to do. So I took an aptitude test and they thought, mechanical/production engineering was a good fit for my skills. And so that's what I studied in my undergrad. And then while I was doing that, kind of the internet was becoming a thing and becoming more widespread. So I started getting interested into that, had a computer, started playing with building websites and just kind of self-taught for the most part. So that was, I think, towards the second, third, fourth years of my engineering. And then when I graduated, I happened to get a job opportunity with a technology firm in India again. And given that they hired me to do this, the only downside, I was happy to take that opportunity, but the only downside was they were working primarily at that time on old COBOL systems, which wasn't really where my heart was, because I was all into the internet and all the cool stuff. So I figured, this is what I want to do in terms of career, just not with this company and with these technologies, and to kind of help me get credentialed in kind of that new career direction. I applied for a master's at Syracuse University. So I came to Syracuse, finished my master's, ended up working briefly for the College of Law there, and then for a smaller consulting firm, which was actually run by one of the faculty at Syracuse. So spent almost 10 years in Syracuse, both as a student and working. And then I got married and my wife didn't like the cold as much. And so we moved to Atlanta in 2012, and I've been here since. Again, I had joined a smaller company in Atlanta. We were then acquired by Proficient, and that's kind of where I've been ever since. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your background. Can you share a defining moment in your life that forced you to reinvent yourself?
I think I think there have been a few. I'm trying to pick the top one. So one would definitely be kind of changing, careers and studying for one thing, figuring out what I'm more interested in and kind of developing that passion and being self-taught, and then figuring out, okay, how do I change directions, um, and make that into something I can, do going forward. So that was definitely defining. I mean, the last 20 years of my life have been defined by that decision. So I would say that was kind of a pivotal moment.
So what was your mindset shift? What triggered you to make that change?
It was a combination of factors. So one, I think, like I said, it was, natural interest and kind of following that interest definitely helped in my case. Um, I think timing wise, in terms of, technology goes in cycles. And I think when the internet was new, it was a much wider open field, right? Like when no one knows how to build websites, they're willing to hire a college kid to do it for them. It's a lot harder when there are, billion-dollar consulting firms out there that are offering the same services. So I
Mhm.
think, being in the right place at the right time obviously helped in that sense. And then kind of realizing that, hey, the path that I had been studying for, even the company I was working for, like it was a paycheck, but it wasn't really where my heart was. It wasn't, you know, it's not when you wake up excited going to work and being like, hey, I enjoy solving this problem or tackling this issue. And so I think those were the kind of three main criteria that led me to feel that, okay, it's time to pivot and I can make the pivot and there is an opportunity here.
Okay. So yes, you've had quite the journey, multiple pivots, multiple changes. It sounds like you had confidence and um, passion behind each one. What role did failure play in shaping the person who you are today?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the things I've learned is I don't like to think of it as failure, right? I think our perspectives affect our outcomes to a very large extent. And so I think of it more as setbacks and learning opportunities. And so, you know, I think that helps because a failure feels like an endpoint, whereas if you think of it as just a setback, it feels more like, hey, it's another step on the journey, and that gives you the motivation to keep going forward. And so, you know, we've all had failures in life. There've been jobs I've applied to that I haven't gotten. There've been, girls I asked out that turned me down. So as long as as long as you don't think of it as a failure or think of it as a, hey, this was the end, it's over, there's nothing more I can do. I feel like the mindset that's helped me keep moving forward is just thinking of it as, okay, what can I do? What can I change? How can I improve? What is the skill I'm lacking? What do I need to add to my resume to make sure I do get that opportunity the next time?
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So this podcast is really all about, successful people who've had a journey of pivots and changes and resilience and reinvention. And so, what strategies have helped you to navigate uncertainty rather than resist it during your journey?
That's a great question. I think that's something I probably still struggle with because by nature I'm pretty analytical as a person. And so, there is that tendency to overanalyze and be like, hey, if I'm uncertain, let me do some more research, let me read another book, let me consult with another person. But I think at the end of the day, you have to kind of, I guess deadlines are a good way of putting an end to that because when you run out of time, you have to make a decision. So it's kind of creating that, urgency where you feel like, okay, I know I'm never going to have the perfect information. I'm never going to have know the complete answer. I just have to make my best guess. and then having the faith that, okay, either way, I know I'll be able to figure it out and I'll be fine, and it's not going to be the end of the world if I guess wrong. So that's kind of the way I approach those kinds of questions.
So it's a lot of self-reflection and really counting and betting on yourself. What type of support system has been there for you when you're trying to reinvent or pivot from one role to another?
I think I mean, the support system is very important, right? And it changes over time and it changes in context, right? There's family, uh, parents, uh, my wife, my colleagues, people I work for. I've been fortunate to have had a few good mentors. So I think you kind of lean on all of them depending on who you think is around and who has the most insight or you think might be able to help. But yeah, it is good to have that sounding board. Sometimes there are ideas which sound great in your head, and then you bounce them off someone and you get a reaction where it's, you can look at their face and you're like, okay, this isn't landing. Maybe I need to rethink this. And other times there are ideas I've had where I'm like, hey, I'm not sure, does this make sense? And you talk to someone about it and they get really excited and they're like, yeah, this is really cool. You should do this. And so I think having that trusted person that you can talk to and share your thoughts and get that feedback is really crucial and helps in making decisions.
Okay. So for those who are listening, there might be someone out there who's like, how do I find a mentor? How do I find someone that I can trust to bounce ideas off of or to help me when I'm in a bind? What advice would you give to those individuals?
I mean, the first is just ask, right? There are so many people out there who are happy and eager to help. If you ask them, advice particularly is one of those things which I have come to realize is I almost never give it unless I'm asked because it's not well received. Right? Like if someone's not ready to hear a message, even if you think you have the right message for them, uh, they may not take it the right way. But if someone shows that, hey, I'm open for that feedback and I am looking for an honest perspective, then I think a lot of people are happy to share their thoughts. And it's surprising how many people are actually genuinely out there willing to help people. So definitely ask, I would say. And then the second is, kind of be that person that people can trust and confide in and that person that people feel comfortable giving feedback to, right? If you get defensive, if you start arguing, if you take it the wrong way, people are going to shut down and be like, okay, he's not ready to hear this. So as long as, you are coming across to them as, hey, this is someone I trust, this is someone I like, this is someone I want to help, this is someone who's motivated and asking for the right reasons, then I think it'll be easier to find those mentors who are willing to take the time to help you out.
Okay. What has been the most unexpected lesson in your career journey?
Asking really tough questions today. I got to think about all of these. I'd say another kind of, yeah, like unexpected lesson was um, that are, things we think are sometimes fixed quantities about us aren't necessarily fixed. And I'll elaborate, right? So I grew up kind of more nerdy, as you might guess, based on my interest in computers. And I was more introverted, definitely, and not that open to talking to people or presenting or public speaking, all those kinds of things. And then while I was still at Syracuse working for that faculty members company, like I mentioned, he said, hey, there's an opportunity to be an adjunct faculty for this course. You know the subject well, why don't you teach it? And I was like, okay, sure. And first time I'm standing at the podium facing this class of kids, half of whom look really bored, and some of them were, like I was a student maybe just a few years ago at that point, and so there's definitely that imposter syndrome of, hey, who am I standing here teaching them, grading them, asking them questions? Um, but I did it, and I really enjoyed it, and I started to enjoy that process of teaching, putting together a presentation, reading the room, um, and kind of sharing knowledge. And so that was kind of an unexpected outcome that after a year or two, when I've done it for a few semesters, it went from being something that, hey, I'm like, is this me? Can I ever do this? It doesn't feel comfortable to, I enjoy this and this is perfectly natural. And, based on the students' feedback, I think I got pretty good at it as well. So I would say that's definitely a lesson that stuck, right? Like, don't limit yourself and don't feel like, okay, just because this feels hard or unnatural at first, it doesn't mean it won't get easier with time.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. Fear is, a big part of people's like obstacles and things that they need to overcome. But public speaking is the number one form of fear that most, I'd say, humans have. And so you mentioned reading the room. Like you had the knowledge, but you have to know your audience and you have to know what mind state they're in. You could be the last class of the day and they're just exhausted. So how do you energize them to focus and learn during your class? And so those experiences definitely sound like where you had to reinvent yourself as well. So how has that now played out into your career and your journey, since teaching that program?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. There's a couple of lessons there. One was you can reinvent yourself, right? Like, don't feel like, hey, this is me and I'm stuck in a mold and I have to work only on this path. Um, it is a big fear, but if you tackle it, it becomes easy. And then you realize, hey, what other fears or what other preconceived notions do I have that are perhaps not true and needlessly holding me back? um, Saying yes is kind of the another big takeaway from that, right? Like, when he asked me, "Do you want to teach this class?" A part of me was definitely being like, "Do I really want to do that? That feels uncomfortable." And I'm so glad I said yes at the moment. And so, learning to kind of lean into that discomfort, say yes to new opportunities, and see where they take you. I think it's definitely valuable life lessons that can help you at any stage in life.
Okay, wonderful. I love that example. Thank you again for sharing it. How do you balance ambition with well-being and personal fulfillment?
That is a great question. And I think the answer depends on each person. Um, like, you have to figure out what's right for yourself.
I'm asking specifically for you. How do
Okay.
you balance it?
Yeah, I'm kind of arriving there because
Okay.
there's people, right? And I have some people who are like perfectly content where they are. They don't want more responsibility. They don't want more headaches. They don't want more stress. They're happy with their salary. They're happy kind of with their role. They have hobbies in life. Um, and so I look at that as kind of one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end, I have people, some are mentors, some people I know, some are friends who are very driven. They're like, hey, I want that next job. I want the next promotion. I want the next raise. I want to fill my day 24/7 with, go, go, go. Otherwise, I'm not, you know, it's a completely different personality. And so I think the answer would be very different for both of those people on what is enough or where do you want to be in life. And so when I think of it for myself, I kind of weigh my personality heavily into that, and even stage of life, right? Like, when you have young kids, you may want to spend kind of back off the accelerator for a bit, spend the time with them. Uh, there's going to come years when they don't want to spend time with you. So definitely enjoy that time when they're younger and they are asking for your time. And so I think it's a combination of all of those, right? And like, knowing your personality, knowing your life goals, knowing your other commitments, and then finding what makes sense for you.
Have you personally defined what personal fulfillment is for you?
I think it changes from time to time. So
Okay, what is it in this moment?
in this moment, it is having fulfilling work, working with, on a project with people, doing something that you feel contributes and with people you like. So, that's kind of the work side of things. On the personal side, I'm a fairly curious person by nature, so I love, exploring new things. I feel like I've had a dozen hobbies and they keep changing every 6 months. So, I know that's something that's important for me to have that time, uh, that downtime where I can just, whether it is dive deep into a book or do some woodworking or, photography or whatever that thing is that kind of gives me that peace. So I need to have that time for that in my day or in my week. And then it's also about learning for me. I enjoy learning. Currently, I'm pursuing an MBA. And again, that was part of being like, okay, I feel like I've done this for a while. I'm happy with where I am, but as I see where I'm going, what do I need to learn? What are the areas of growth for me? And making time for that as well. So I think it's kind of balancing those three things is what I look for, if that
And
answers your question.
oh, that does. Thank you for elaborating on that. Um, do you find at times that across the three, one may be higher priority than the other? And how do you balance that? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, of course. I mean, sometimes it's one of those will be on fire and will take your attention, right? When your kid's sick, you don't care about, that polishing that presentation for work. If the project is going sideways and you have to right the ship there, you're going to spend some late nights and perhaps not be as present at home or have time for your hobbies, of course. So I think, you have to be willing to flex. You can't be rigid, but you try to average it out over time. So yeah, when that um, stressful project is finally over the finish line, you can take some time off and maybe, go a little bit easy and relax and not push yourself as hard or feel that, okay, it's okay to kick back for a bit and catch up on the other things as well. So
Okay.
that's kind of how I try to balance all three.
Okay. Excellent. What practical steps do you take to remain adaptable in a constantly evolving industry, workplace? Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I'm lucky to be naturally curious, so I enjoy learning. But in in my field and I think even in the business of consulting, you have to always be willing to learn because it's a new project, even if it's kind of the same core technology, you're dealing with, different third-party systems, different clients, different requirements, different business problems. So having that curiosity of wanting to figure it out, wanting to learn, wanting to expand, I think definitely helps. Um, and then, leaning back on kind of some of those other traits of, say yes. It's okay to not know all the answers. It's okay to be figuring things out. And it's okay to not be perfect. You have to do the best you can and realize that, okay, everyone else doesn't have it figured out either. We're all making this up as we go along and having the faith that, yeah, you will figure it out if you take it up.
Okay. What has been your biggest compromise in life and career?
Do these questions ever get easy?
Not really. I'm trying to, I think it's important to be vulnerable. And it's also important for the listeners, right, to really understand your journey. And you have a successful career, right? And sometimes people are like, how did he do it? How did he get there? Because I'm struggling. I just finished my mechanical engineering degree and I can't find a job. And so hearing from you gives them hope.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I appreciate the questions.
And so we know you've had to make compromises along the way. And so if you're able to share them, I think it could be very insightful for listeners.
Sure. Yeah, I can give like I guess one of the big kind of compromises in life is, the decision to move to the US as an immigrant. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the way kind of the visa process works. But I came here as a student, and then when I got a job, I transferred to an H-1 visa, and that means you're kind of tied to an employer.
Mhm.
And so it's harder to change jobs and then be without an employer willing to sponsor you. You really can't stay in the country. And so that meant for me, it was, if I wanted to do a startup or something on my own, that really wasn't going to fly because you can't even sponsor yourself. You couldn't start a company, find someone and sponsor yourself. And obviously that becomes I think the best time to kind of do those things is when you're younger and you don't have the family responsibilities. And that's, not the time when I'm not saying it's impossible. I think other people have done that. But it becomes a lot harder, and it wasn't something which I was able to do or pursue at that time. And so I think that was kind of like a compromise between, things you would have liked to do versus things which you think are possible right now. And so the mindset I adopted is, yeah, okay, at the end of the day, there's always going to be things you can't do. But you got to figure out what you can do and what you want to do and what works best within the constraints. And sometimes, that's the seed of creativity as well. If you give someone a blank canvas, it's a lot harder to do something great. But if you give someone a problem to solve, they often arrive at great solutions. So that's kind of, I think, one of the big compromises, which I had to make was, do I want to stay here and be kind of constrained in the type of work I can do, or do I want to go back home and maybe have um, greater flexibility in the kinds of roles I can take?
That is an incredible insight that you've just shared, and I appreciate you for doing so. You are not alone, right? There are others out there who are struggling with the same or maybe compromising in the same type of way. And so I appreciate you sharing your personal story because it really makes a difference. So maybe I'll throw you an easier question. If you could go back to a time of reinvention in your life and career, what advice would you give your past self at the start of that transition?
I feel like I could write a book because every 10 years I look back at myself 10 years ago and I'm like, I was an idiot.
No. Well, self-reflection is important. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that the good news is hopefully I'm learning as I grow. The bad news is there's a lot I had to learn. But yeah, I think, I think there are kind of, when you're younger, I would say, be less fearful, be more willing to experiment, be more willing to put yourself out there, try new things and fail. And then, yeah, I think so. If I kind of go back to the formative stage, I think that's the advice I would give myself.
Okay.
Primarily, again, maybe it wouldn't apply to everyone. I was kind of more of the nerdy, cautious kid. I'm sure there are guys out there who maybe need the opposite advice.
Or not. There's both. There's both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I consider myself one of those nerdy, cautious kids. I'm an introvert as well. I studied computer science. I loved taking things apart when I was younger. Um, so yeah, I embraced the term nerd.
Yeah, me too. To that point, another kind of lesson I would say is, I think being introverted, sometimes it's easier to work on abstract ideas and computers and code. But at the end of the day, I think, at least in my current perspective, is right, like, don't underemphasize people. At the end of the day, it's all about people. Um, so figure out how you can serve the most people, and that'll probably lead to the best outcomes as well, both for yourself and for the world.
Yes, absolutely. I remember the days of just wanting to sit behind my computer screen and my keyboard and don't bother me. I want to get work done. But as I grew in my career, I realized I couldn't do that. So it became really a learned skill, right? Okay, I know I can't sit in my office. I have to get out, especially, as you lead teams and things like that. And so I'm still introverted, but, I know what it takes to be social and extroverted and networking and to do all those things. It's just when it's time to recharge, like if I've been around a bunch of people all day long, then I need my quiet time to recharge. Or if I go to a conference and during the day I'm networking, I'm going over the showroom floor and all those things, I need an hour or two in my room alone to decompress before dinner. And
Yep.
so it sounds like you have some similar tendencies, but you're not saying that you're shy or you're quiet because you've been very successful in your career.
Yeah, and you're a great example, right? Like talking to you, I wouldn't say, think of you as, oh, she's introverted or withdrawn or anything. And the fact that you're doing this podcast is great. So it's a perfect example of learning to work with it rather than feeling like it's a limitation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, last question. Um, what is your ultimate goal? Your personal definition of success?
I don't know if I have one. I think that's been one of the things that I've often asked, and I don't know if I found the answer, right? There's like I know people say find your passion and chase your passion, uh, but I don't know if I have one undying thing where I can be like, okay, this is it, and this is all I want to do. And so for me, it's kind of like I said, my interests change over time, my hobbies have changed over time. Maybe by nature, I'm more of a, dabbler than someone who kind of dedicates themselves to one thing. And so it kind of becomes hard for me to say, okay, this is my picture of success because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't know if I'll have the same interests or goals as I do right now. And so I've tried to take it more as a, you know, go with figure out from where I am today, look at what the next step is. And that's about as far as I I generally plan.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your feedback today. I've enjoyed our conversation and I look forward to staying connected.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again for putting this together and appreciate what you're doing. I think that's a great idea. And thanks for having me on.